All right, we begin here. The embattled British Prime Minister Liz Truss has resigned. In a statement outside Downing Street earlier, she said that she could not deliver the mandate she was elected for and had notified the King that she was resigning as a Tory leader. Her brief stint in office was marred by a series of disastrous economic decisions that led to the sacking of Kwasi as the finance minister and the appointment of Jeremy Hunt, who reversed Kwateng's tax cuts. Truss says that there will be Conservative leadership election to be completed within the next week. All right, let's talk more on this breaking news story. Then we are joined by our international news editor here at SABC News, Sophie Mokoena. All right, very interesting. I mean, already 45 days in office, and I wonder if this is some sort of a record. The wheels turn quite quickly when we're talking about UK politics, aren't they?
Very quick, a record indeed. I mean, a few weeks ago, she was at the helm, she was in charge, and we saw her leading the government in terms of preparations to the funeral or during the funeral of the Queen, meeting the King. And it was as though that she will be able to drive this car, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. But we know that from day one, her economic policies were questionable, particularly the issue of cutting tax. That was going to cost the UK a lot of money, and there was no budget for such moves. And this speaks to when you come in as a leader of government, be it at head state level or prime minister level, you have to be careful in terms of your policies, because they can really cause a huge damage to the country. And unfortunately, at a time where the whole world is grappling with the war in Ukraine and United Kingdom was affected, we know that recently we saw reports that there has been pamphlets circulating in the United Kingdom where the citizens are warned that this winter is going to be a tough one with power issues and gas problem or the supply thereof. And therefore, when you come in and there's this drama, of course, you will experience challenges. We saw the finance minister resigning, and he was at the IMF meeting. He had to go back and only to find that he was fired, even though we are told that he resigned. I mean, the markets were not kind.
It was very interesting. It seemed, and I read that scathing resignation letter by Kwasi Kwateng, and he seemed to point to the fact that it looked like he was being thrown under the bus, essentially. And what he seemed to say in that long letter was that, you know, he was only implementing what he was told to implement, and that it wasn't necessarily his ideas. So the plan to have him, take the fall has seemed to backfire on Liz Truss in certain ways.
Exactly. People were saying at that time that he can't be a fall guy. This is a document presented by Liz Truss. This is what she wanted. And therefore, if this doesn't work, she must go. But she was adamant, even yesterday, that she is not going. But unfortunately, the pressure within her party was so huge that she has to leave. And she has left. Even though it will be days, as she pointed out, they have to appoint another prime minister. But there's a growing call within the United Kingdom that the best way in this case is to get a fresh mandate, and therefore there must be elections.
Yeah, I mean, we hear about these growing calls for a resignation, and I can't help but to think of that in the context of South Africa, and in fact, many other African nations, and one wonders what we can learn, from something like this. We've, over years had growing calls for presidents to step down, but they seem to survive, year after year. It doesn't happen the way that it's happened. Except if we're looking at the case of a certain finance minister who lasted only a few days in office. But here we have an actual prime minister, essentially a head of state, who has had to resign in such a small space of time. Could she not have survived this? How big were these growing calls for her resignation?
You know what? The economy is a very important pillar of any country. And therefore, you cannot play or be found wanting on economic issues. Unfortunately, on the continent, we allow that to happen. A case in point is Zimbabwe and other countries where the economy today is in a crisis because people didn't think, or there was no accountability in terms of when those signs were there that the economy will collapse because of certain policies if you don't manage them well. South Africa, the issue of electricity, it looks like it's business as usual.
Yeah.
But we know that this has led to a huge regress in terms of economic growth. People are not working. People are starving because the electricity is the lifeblood of commerce. And if you don't have power, you will have problems. But there's still, you know, only a week or two ago, we saw the board leaving. Anyway, it was a board anymore because many people have had resigned. And therefore, but you still have the managers and some powerful people who are still in their positions, not in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, a difficult situation for the Tories then. I guess at this point, you know, one would have to kind of figure out who's next, who's next in line to be the Prime Minister. Has a name sort of already emerged? Where are we standing at this point? I mean, it seemed to happen quite quickly. And I mean, I'm someone from Africa, so I don't consider that these things would happen as quickly as they did. I thought there's still going to be a long process. There's going to be some sort of, you know, whether it's some sort of parliamentary action, but it happened. It just happened sort of all of a sudden. Have we started to see who would emerge next?
It's not clear yet. Earlier on, I was speaking to the executive producer of SA Today and Full View, actually arranging crossings to United Kingdom, because for me, the writing was on the wall that there's no way tomorrow we'll have Liz Truss still in the driving seat.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for now, it's not clear yet who is likely to take over. What I do know is that the Labour Party is pushing that there must be fresh elections so that whoever gets a mandate can do what he or she is supposed to do, looking at what transpired.
All right, Sophie Mokoena, many thanks to you, our international editor here at SABC News, weighing in, of course, on those news just in. Liz Truss not surviving, of course, those growing calls for her to step down, and indeed, as news just in, that she has indeed stepped down at this time.